There are characters in Adventure Time who announce themselves with flash and fire, with loud gestures and wild colors. And then there's Huntress Wizard. She doesn't step onto the stage, she glides. Her presence isn't loud, it's magnetic, quietly compelling, like the stillness in a forest just before it rains. Before we ever knew her name, we felt her existence. That quiet, magical pull. She first appeared in the episode Wizard Battle, tucked among an eclectic crowd of chaotic spellcasters, each more theatrical than the last. Yet she stood apart. While others cast spells to win, she observed. While others flaunted, she vanished. No bright fireworks, no dramatic spells, just a silent figure wrapped in mossy green, her eyes hidden, her voice unheard. That appearance was fleeting, but it was deliberate. Adventure Time has always known how to introduce a character without telling you who they are, only making you want to know more. It wasn't until later in Flute Spell that we truly met her. Hey, real quick, if you're enjoying this so far, I'd be so grateful if you subscribed. I put a lot of time and heart into making these videos, and every new subscriber genuinely helps me keep going. Thanks for being here. Imagine a clearing in the forest, a boy with a flute, a wind that carries more than just sound. And from that wind, from the harmony between music and silence, she emerges. Huntress Wizard. The moment is soft, deliberate. She speaks not with urgency, but with the measured rhythm of someone who's heard the world too loudly and chosen a quieter path. Her first words aren't questions. They're statements, observations, poetry wrapped in moss. And in those moments, we understand. She's not just a magic user. She is part of the forest. She doesn't live in a castle, or a wizard tower, or even a cottage. She lives within the woods, as the woods. Leaves cling to her cloak like companions. Her boots are made from bark and shadow. Her mask, with its gentle curve and hidden eyes, tells you everything and nothing at once. It's protective, but not defensive. Symbolic, but not boastful. She doesn't seek to be recognized. She seeks to be understood, and only by those who know how to listen to the wild. There's something almost ancient about her, not in the sense of age, but in essence, as though she didn't learn magic from books or scrolls, but from roots and rivers and the silent gaze of owls. You get the feeling that her spells are not cast, but released like the sigh of a tree that's been waiting for spring. And when she moves, it's like the wind weaving through the trees, not a sound wasted, every motion balanced. She walks like someone who never forgot how to tread lightly. Her gestures are few but powerful, and when she speaks, it's with the tone of someone who doesn't need to raise their voice to be heard. There's beauty in her design, but it's not the polished beauty of a royal princess or a sparkling sorceress. It's the beauty of overgrown paths, moss-covered stone, and half-lit corners of forgotten woods. Her aesthetic whispers rather than shouts, and that's why it stays with you. What makes her stand out isn't her power, though she clearly holds it in abundance. It's her restraint. She doesn't dominate scenes. She doesn't clamor for attention. She simply exists, and somehow in doing so, commands your curiosity. Huntress Wizard is what happens when nature is allowed to speak through a person. She's the embodiment of a forest that's been listening far longer than we've been talking. A character woven from vines and stillness, complexity and quiet. She's not here to explain herself, and that's part of the magic. We don't learn Huntress Wizard's backstory in the traditional sense. There's no dramatic flashback, no narrator detailing her past, no clear moment that tells us where she came from or why she became who she is, and yet we feel like we know her, not through exposition, but through atmosphere. Adventure Time has always been a show that trusts its audience to sit with the unknown. It understands that not everything needs to be said to be understood. And Huntress Wizard is one of the most powerful examples of that philosophy. She isn't a puzzle to solve. She's a presence to absorb, a feeling that lingers in the quiet space between plot points. If you look closely, her magic isn't like the others. It doesn't blast or explode or glitter. It grows. It spirals out of the ground. It emerges with the same patience as ivy climbing stone. Her energy doesn't feel like something taken from a source. It feels like something given back. That contrast between her and other magical beings in the land of Ooh is striking. Think about the likes of Ice King, whose power stems from obsession and tragedy, or Princess Bubblegum, who manipulates science like a chessboard. Their power is driven by will, often at the cost of harmony. Huntress Wizard, though, hers is driven by balance. When she casts a spell, it feels more like she's asking the world for help, and the world responds because it trusts her. She doesn't dominate nature, she cooperates with it. Visually, she carries that essence too. Her look is layered in symbolism, from her vine-wrapped limbs to the moss that drapes like quiet armor. Every part of her feels grown rather than made. Even her color palette, muted greens, earthy browns, soft grays, mirrors the shades of the forest floor. She could vanish into the woods with a single step, and perhaps often she does. And then there's her voice, calm, low, a little detached, yet never cold. There's warmth in the way she speaks, but it's the warmth of a campfire you didn't expect to find in the middle of the night. A warmth you don't question because it feels like it was meant to be there. She doesn't rush her words. She pauses. She lets things land, as if she's aware that silence is a language too, that sometimes the space between two lines of dialogue says more than the lines themselves. In her interactions, especially with Finn, she often seems amused. Not in a mocking way, but like a spirit that's seen 1,000 springs and still finds joy in watching a flower bloom. She observes, weighs, considers. She doesn't react with impulsiveness. She responds with depth. There's a kind of wild wisdom in that, an understanding that not everything needs to be named or claimed or conquered. Some things are more beautiful when left untamed. And it's this refusal to be defined by others that gives her such enduring mystique. She doesn't fit into neat categories. She's not the hero, not the villain, not even a guide. She's something in between, a part of the landscape, a guardian of spaces too quiet for most to hear. You begin to realize that her entire identity is a metaphor. Huntress Wizard is what it means to be unreachable in a way that's not cruel, but sacred. She's not hiding. She's protecting something. Maybe herself, maybe the world, maybe both. Even her mask plays into that. It's not armor in the usual sense. It's a boundary, a soft wall that says, you may look, but you will not see unless you know how to look beyond appearances. It invites curiosity while demanding respect. And while some might find that frustrating, it's also comforting. Because in a world where so many characters search desperately to be understood, Huntress Wizard shows us the quiet power of not needing to be, of being whole even in mystery, of belonging completely to oneself. She embodies the kind of solitude that doesn't stem from loneliness, but from a deep, chosen connection to something bigger, to the rhythms of the wild, the unspoken rules of the forest, the language of wind through branches, and maybe, just maybe, to something eternal. To understand Huntress Wizard's presence is to step into a deeper layer of Adventure Time, one that doesn't just tell stories, but whispers them through imagery and mood. Her very existence feels like a folk tale born from the woods, the kind children hear while lying in hammocks under the stars, the kind no one fully remembers, yet everyone feels in their bones. We rarely see her home if she has one. And maybe that's the point. She is her home. She doesn't need a roof or 4 walls to feel safe. Her sanctuary is wherever the air tastes like pine and the soil breathes with life. It's easy to imagine her sleeping in the crook of a giant tree, or meditating beside a river whose name no one else knows. Her connection to the land is not performative. It's essential. That idea of being at one with the earth runs through every part of her character. You never see her use modern tools or chase technology or indulge in material comforts. Her power lies in what she doesn't need. And it's not out of asceticism or moral superiority. It's out of simplicity. Like a tree, she just grows, quietly without needing applause. There's something refreshing in that, especially in a show where even the quietest characters sometimes crave attention, love, validation. Huntress Wizard seems content simply being. She doesn't seek to change the world. She seeks to stay in balance with it. And that balance extends beyond her magic or lifestyle. It touches her very soul. Her emotions, while present, feel distilled. She doesn't erupt with rage or collapse in sorrow. But if you look closely, you'll see the tremble of wind in her branches, the slow shift of seasons within her heart. And when she smiles, because, yes, sometimes she does, it's the kind of smile you might miss if you blink, soft, brief, real. Like sunlight slipping through leaves in the early morning, seen only by those who wake before the world does. There's no one else quite like her in the series, and maybe that's why she leaves such a lasting impression, despite appearing in relatively few episodes. She's not designed to be a main character. She's designed to be a moment, one that stays with you long after the scene ends. And what a carefully crafted moment she is. Her character design alone carries more storytelling than some characters get in full arcs. The way her hood casts shadows that obscure her expression. The vines that curl not just around her body, but through her, like veins of magic. The glowing green aura that follows her like breath in cold air. Nothing about her is accidental. You can feel the animators loved her, not just in the way she's drawn, but in the space they give her. Silence in animation is expensive. It takes courage to let a scene breathe, to let a character simply exist in a frame without rushing to the next beat. But Huntress Wizard earns that stillness. She becomes it. Even in motion, she never seems hurried. Her gestures are like wind-bent branches, flexible, elegant, unpredictable. She walks like someone who's never forgotten she has roots. Her casting spells doesn't feel like a performance, it feels like prayer, a conversation with the unseen. And there's a lesson in that, not just for the characters who encounter her, but for us as viewers. Huntress Wizard invites us to slow down, to notice, to breathe, to remember that mystery isn't something to be feared or solved, but something to sit beside for a while. She reminds us that presence is a kind of power, that stillness can hold strength, that we don't have to be loud to be seen, or seen to be real. She walks a line between human and elemental, emotion and instinct, solitude and connection. And that ambiguity, that refusal to be pinned down, is what gives her character so much resonance. She becomes a mirror for the parts of us we don't always understand, our quiet yearning to be part of something larger, to disappear into the wild and still be whole. In her, we see what it might look like to belong not to a kingdom or a cause or even a relationship, but to the forest itself. to the idea that being in harmony with your environment is not weakness, but wisdom. She is, in the end, less of a person and more of a poem, one written in bark and breeze, one you don't read, you feel. There's an almost mythic cadence to the way Huntress Wizard moves through the series. She doesn't develop in the way most characters do, not with loud revelations or clearly defined arcs. Instead, she unfolds. Like a plant reaching toward sunlight, she reveals herself slowly, in fragments, in half-phrases, in softened glances, in decisions made without explanation. That's part of what makes her feel so real. Not everyone in life tells their story in full. Some people speak in symbols, in presence, in silence. And Huntress Wizard is one of those people. And yet, despite all that quiet mystery, there is emotion under the surface. It shows up in her chemistry with Finn, in the smallest of gestures, a tilt of her head, a shift in her stance, the flicker of conflict behind her mask when she's asked to step closer than she's used to. Because for all her power, she is, in many ways, a creature of distance. She holds the world at arm's length, not out of cruelty, but because closeness is a kind of risk, a kind of vulnerability that someone like her, so attuned to nature, to change, to impermanence, feels more deeply than most. When Finn begins to orbit her world, it feels like a stone skipping across still water. There's curiosity, resonance, a moment where connection almost happens. And that's what makes it meaningful. Not that it's romantic or tragic, but that it's possible. That she allowed someone near, even for a little while. That allowance, brief as it is, tells us more about her than any backstory could. It tells us that beneath the moss and mystery, there's a heart that still remembers how to open, even if it doesn't do so often, even if it opens like a flower that blooms once a year, and only for those who wait long enough. Her relationship with Finn doesn't define her, that's important. It simply reveals a layer, a moment of gentle contrast, of softness where we expected strength, or perhaps where we realized that softness is a form of strength. It's easy to romanticize a character like Huntress Wizard, to turn her into a symbol of everything we wish we could be, self-sufficient, calm, untouchable. But that would miss the point, because she isn't just a fantasy. She's a reflection of something very real, the part of us that longs for space, that seeks solitude not out of sadness, but peace. It craves a world where we don't have to explain ourselves to be accepted. And yet, she also reminds us that even in solitude, connection matters. That we can be rooted in ourselves and still reach out. That magic isn't just found in spells or artifacts, but in the quiet moments we share with others, even when words fall away. Her aesthetic, natural, ancient, intentional, is not just a visual choice, it's a philosophy, a way of being, a reminder that we too are part of something larger, that we belong not just to cities and stories and struggles, but to soil and silence and sky. Huntress Wizard is a whisper in a world of shouts, a presence made more powerful by her refusal to perform. She is the shadow between the trees, the hush before the storm, the kind of character who teaches not through lectures, but through example. She reminds us that mystery isn't emptiness, it's depth, that stillness isn't passivity, it's purpose. The disappearing isn't always escape, it can be becoming. So when you think of her, when you picture those glowing eyes beneath the mask, the cloak of leaves brushing the ground as she walks, don't think of a character you barely know. Think of a truth you've always felt, but didn't have words for. She's not here to be explained. She's here to be felt. And in that feeling, we begin to understand. If you spend enough time with Huntress Wizard, even just in fragments, you begin to notice something quietly remarkable. She doesn't just cast spells or wield forest magic. She lives a philosophy. And it's not one she preaches. You won't find her scribbling wisdom on scrolls or lecturing younger adventurers. Her lessons don't arrive with a bang. They seep in like rain into soil, slowly reshaping the landscape. At her core, Huntress Wizard believes in harmony over dominance. It's a way of being that threads through her every action. How she treats the forest, how she views power, and even how she relates to others. She doesn't bend the world to her will. She listens, she collaborates, she adapts. In that way, she feels less like a traditional wizard and more like a caretaker, not just of trees and rivers and mossy dens, but of the balance between self and world. She doesn't try to conquer her environment. She tries to hear it, to feel its pulse, to work with it, not against it. This philosophy is deeply embedded in her personality. She's quiet, yes, but not in a detached, cold way. It's the quiet of someone who's chosen their words carefully, who understands that presence doesn't have to be loud to be felt. That stillness isn't emptiness, it's awareness. She's observant in a way that goes beyond simple perception. When Huntress Wizard enters a space, you can feel her taking in every sound, every shift in the air. Her mind seems tuned to frequencies most others miss. She notices the things that live in the margins, shadows, silences, the twitch of a leaf before it falls. And that awareness extends to people too. She doesn't judge openly, but she assesses. She takes her time. Her trust is not easily earned, and yet, when she offers it, even for a brief moment, it feels profound, because you know it came from real discernment, not just politeness. There's a fundamental selectiveness to her interactions. She's not antisocial, just intentional. She doesn't chase company for comfort or out of obligation. When she shares space with someone, it's because something in them resonates with something in her. That's part of what made her dynamic with Finn so intriguing. Not because it was some dramatic romance, but because it revealed how she navigates vulnerability. She's not someone who falls easily into connection. She approaches it like a rare flower, something fragile, something worth pausing for. There's a moment during their interactions that says everything without saying much at all. When Finn expresses romantic interest, she doesn't reject it out of fear or shyness or superiority. She pauses, she considers, she feels. And her response is layered. It's not a no, but it's not quite a yes either. It's a maybe, filtered through the lens of someone who values her independence deeply. She says something quietly heartbreaking and quietly powerful, that she doesn't want to lose herself in someone else, that even love, if it costs her the integrity of her being, is not worth the price. That is perhaps the most defining trait of Huntress Wizard's personality, self-containment. Not in the sense of isolation, but in the sense of rootedness. She knows who she is. She spent time in the wilderness of her own soul and come back not only intact, but stronger. And she guards that selfhood, not jealously, but respectfully. She's not afraid of intimacy, but she's cautious about it, because she understands what many people don't until much later in life, that merging with another person isn't always a gift. Sometimes it's a loss. And sometimes solitude isn't loneliness, it's preservation. Her personality is a blend of serenity and strength. She's unshaken by chaos, not because she's numb to it, but because she's anchored. When others panic, she grounds. When others react, she reflects. And in that quiet resistance to hurry and noise, she becomes almost elemental. There's also a kind of dry humor to her, subtle and earthy. It doesn't always register right away. Sometimes it's in the way she teases Finn, or the way she says something serious but lets the edges curl with irony. She's not trying to entertain, but she's not without wit. Her humor is the kind you find in old-growth forests and slow-moving streams. It's there if you're paying attention. When you really sit with Huntress Wizard's character, beneath the mask, beyond the vines, you realize she isn't built to chase the typical goals of most adventurers in Adventure Time. She doesn't want a throne, or eternal glory, or some grand legacy etched into the stars. She wants alignment, not just with nature, but with herself. That internal compass, steady and quiet, guides everything she does. In a world bursting with magic users hungry for power, she is profoundly disinterested in dominance. She doesn't hoard spells or boast about her capabilities. Her power isn't something she flaunts. It's something she inhabits, like a part of her being, as natural as breathing, as sacred as breath itself. This humility, this ease with her own strength is rare, and it's rooted in her philosophy, that power without harmony is meaningless, that knowledge without self-awareness leads to destruction, that the most effective force in the world is one that knows when not to act. She says as much when Finn seeks her guidance. She warns him that being consumed by desire, whether for love or power or validation, can erode identity. And her warning doesn't come from a place of bitterness. It comes from experience. You get the sense that Huntress Wizard has walked that road, that maybe once she too reached for something too quickly and learned. That's the thing about her. She carries memory, even if it's never spoken. Her silence hints at a past shaped by trials, solitude, and maybe even a little heartbreak. But she never lets those experiences sour her. She transforms them into wisdom, quiet, unspoken, but ever-present. This wisdom manifests in the way she draws boundaries, with Finn, with herself, with the world. There's that one moment, small but unforgettable, when she tells Finn that she doesn't want to be someone who changes for another person, that she values the rhythm she's found in her own soul, and she won't give that up for comfort or affection or even someone as kind as him. It's a truth many people struggle their whole lives to express, that selfhood is not selfishness, that honoring your own path isn't rejection, it's respect. Respect for your time, your energy, your purpose. Huntress Wizard lives that truth. Every time she retreats to the forest, or meditates beneath the moon, or declines a bond that doesn't align with her, she's reaffirming a vow she made, not to someone else, but to herself. And yet this doesn't make her hard. It makes her deep. She feels deeply, so deeply in fact, that she protects herself with layers of quiet. It's not that she doesn't care, it's that she cares carefully, with precision, with intention. Her personality isn't rigid, though. There's fluidity to her. She evolves, she listens, she adapts. Think of how she treats the forest, not as something to mold, but as something to attune to. She mirrors that same openness in the way she responds to others. When she meets Finn, she doesn't dismiss him out of pride or superiority. She watches, she listens. She sees who he is becoming, not just who he is. That's a rare gift, seeing potential without demanding change. It's also where her gentleness lives, in that patience, in her ability to let others be who they are, without trying to control them. She doesn't intervene unless necessary. She doesn't overstep. And that restraint, that respect for the autonomy of others makes her more trustworthy than any oath. Because when Huntress Wizard speaks, it's never out of impulse. It's deliberate, measured. She chooses her words like seeds, planting them, then walking away, trusting they'll grow in time. And still, she's not above struggle. You sense it in the moments when emotion bubbles beneath the surface, when she feels torn between affection and autonomy, between trust and self-preservation, between magic and meaning. These moments don't make her weak. They make her whole. Too often, characters in animated shows fall into extremes, too stoic or too dramatic. Huntress Wizard walks the line in between, where real people live. She's not flawless. She's not all-knowing. But she thinks. She feels. She pauses before speaking, considers before committing, and never rushes the unfolding of a moment. Her philosophy can be summed up in that pause, that sacred space between thought and action, between feeling and response. It's there, in that silence, that you see who she really is, not a mystery, but a mindfulness. And this mindfulness colors every choice she makes, from her subtle movements in battle to the way she handles magic with reverence rather than aggression, to her fierce independence, not out of rebellion, but out of alignment. Even her emotional boundaries are acts of love, love for herself, love for the peace she's carved from a chaotic world, love for a life where she doesn't have to be anyone but who she already is. There's something paradoxical about Huntress Wizard. She is one of the most grounded characters in Adventure Time, yet also one of the most elusive. The more you try to pin her down, the more she seems to dissolve into the trees like a shadow at sunset. But that's not avoidance. It's freedom. She lives in the present moment without clinging to it. She doesn't define herself by titles or labels, not by wizard or hero or girlfriend, or any of the stories others might try to wrap around her. She lets go of definitions so she can become something fuller. This is where her relationship with transformation becomes key. Unlike many characters who fear change or chase it in desperation, Huntress Wizard honors transformation, not as something to conquer, but as something to cooperate with. She evolves in sync with nature. When the forest changes, she adapts. When seasons shift, she shifts with them. Her identity is fluid, but not unstable. It's responsive, deeply attuned to the quiet truth that nothing alive stays the same. This awareness gives her personality a sense of grace. She doesn't fight against growth, but she also doesn't rush it. She waits until things are ready, until she's ready. That's why so many of her big decisions take time. She lets understanding ripen like fruit on the vine. When Finn confesses his feelings, she doesn't leap forward or pull away. She lingers in that emotional in-between, not because she's unsure, but because she knows how rare it is to feel deeply and stay true to oneself. That moment reveals her emotional intelligence, her ability to hold complexity without needing resolution. She sees love not as rescue or possession, but as recognition. And that kind of love, the kind that says, I see you, instead of I need you, is far more difficult, but also far more honest. You could say her philosophy is one of emotional ecology. She doesn't bulldoze over her feelings or bury them beneath logic. She lets them breathe, grow, decay, and renew, just like a forest. Emotions to her are part of the natural cycle. They rise, they pass, and in between she learns. This patience makes her a rare kind of teacher. Not the type who hands out answers, but the kind who creates space for others to find their own. She doesn't lecture Finn or scold him. She lets him wrestle with his feelings while gently offering him a mirror, showing him what he's becoming and what he could become if he's willing to listen to himself. That's her quiet magic, not the spell casting, not the shape-shifting, but the mirroring. She reflects truths that others are too distracted to see. She doesn't try to change them. She just holds them up, like moonlight on water. There's something deeply philosophical in that, a belief that people don't need to be fixed. They need to be seen, truly seen, and that seeing someone, really seeing them, is one of the most sacred things we can offer. But that doesn't mean she's all gentleness and serenity. Huntress Wizard is also fierce. And has a protective fire in her, especially when it comes to the natural world. She doesn't just love the forest. She defends it. And not out of ego or territory, but out of reverence. To her, the trees and streams and sky are not scenery. They are kin. That sense of interconnection, of being part of something larger, defines her entire being. She doesn't see herself as above nature or separate from it. She is within it. She is of it. And this changes the way she moves through the world. She doesn't dominate her surroundings. She listens to them. She seeks consent from the land. She treats magic not as a weapon, but as an agreement, a sacred contract between her and the forces she works with. And this philosophy bleeds into every small action. The way she walks silently through leaves. The way she blends into her environment instead of standing out. Even the way she speaks, with pauses, with precision, with presence. She doesn't rush to fill silence because she respects it. To her, silence is not awkward. It's fertile. It's where truths grow, where real listening begins. In fact, it's in her quiet that you understand her best, because her personality isn't performative. She doesn't curate a version of herself for others to admire. What you see is what's there, and what's there is a person who has stripped away all the noise until only essence remains. A lot of people wear masks to hide. Huntress Wizard wears hers to reveal. The vines and antlers, the green cloak, the elemental aura, they're not disguises. They're invitations to step into her world, to see it not through the lens of logic or ambition, but through presence. She's a reminder that not all strength is loud, that not all wisdom is spoken, that not all intimacy requires exposure. Some people reveal themselves fully with every word. Huntress Wizard reveals herself in stillness. And in that stillness she becomes not just a character, but a philosophy made flesh. In the world of adventure time, where colors are loud and chaos often reigns, Huntress Wizard is a quiet heartbeat, a steady rhythm in the background, reminding us that peace isn't a place, it's a practice. She embodies balance, not because she has no conflict, but because she's learned how to live alongside it without letting it consume her. That's the kind of emotional equilibrium that takes years, maybe lifetimes, to cultivate. She's not trying to win at life. She's not here for high scores or grand finales. She's here to tend, to her forest, to her body, to her intuition. And in doing so, she becomes a living philosophy, a walking answer to a question we're all quietly asking. How do I stay whole in a world that keeps pulling me apart? For Huntress Wizard, the answer lies in solitude. Not isolation, but solitude. The intentional kind. The kind that deepens you rather than hardens you. The kind that lets you hear your own thoughts without interference. She doesn't fear being alone because she doesn't feel lonely in it. Her solitude is sacred. It's where her magic sharpens. It's where her heart softens. And when she does choose to let someone in, even briefly, it feels like a gift. Because you know she doesn't do it lightly. She doesn't follow the script of romance or friendship just to feel normal. She connects when it means something. This is what makes her moment with Finn so poignant. not because it's romantic in a typical sense, but because it's emotionally honest. She doesn't tell him what he wants to hear. She tells him what's true for her, and in doing so, she gives him something far more valuable than affection: clarity. It's easy to misread her restraint as coldness, but that's a misinterpretation born from our own discomfort with boundaries. Huntress Wizard is not afraid to say no, and that no is not rejection, it's reverence. It's the sound of someone honoring the rhythm of her own soul. That kind of inner compass, that's rare, especially in a world that constantly tries to rewrite us. Her resistance to that rewriting is part of what makes her feel so real. She doesn't bend for plot. She doesn't change to make someone else comfortable. She grows, yes, but only in ways that feel earned. And yet, despite all this composure, she's not immune to doubt. You can see it flicker sometimes in her eyes, in her silences. She wonders maybe if she's missing something, if solitude is enough, if connection can exist without chaos. But she never lets those questions define her. Instead, she carries them gently, like stones in her pocket. Always there, always quietly shifting as she walks, but never dragging her down. That, too, is a philosophy. One rooted in acceptance, not of everything, but of the unresolved. Huntress Wizard doesn't need all the answers to feel complete. She trusts that some truths take time, that some truths never arrive, and that's okay. Her story isn't about triumph or tragedy. It's about integration, about finding a way to live where your power, your peace, and your purpose all live in the same body, and about knowing when to draw your bow and when to simply watch the wind move the leaves. She doesn't demand attention. She earns it, and not with spectacle, but with stillness. And that stillness becomes her legacy. Not everyone notices her. Not everyone remembers her. But those who do, those who truly see her, are changed by it. Because in her presence, they learn something most heroes never teach: that being in tune with yourself is the greatest magic of all. So when she disappears back into the trees, her footsteps soundless, her silhouette melting into the green, it doesn't feel like she's leaving. It feels like she's returning to herself, to the earth, to the rhythm that never stopped playing, even when no one else could hear it. That's the essence of Huntress Wizard. She is what happens when you stop trying to be someone and start listening to who you already are. To understand Huntress Wizard is to understand her magic, but not just as power, not just as tools or spells or mystical tricks. Her magic is more than that. It's a reflection of her soul, of the way she moves through the world, listens to the wind, and blends with the land beneath her feet. Unlike many other magic users in Adventure Time who shout their spells or conjure with flair, her magic feels like breathing, natural, quiet, inevitable. Let's start with something subtle but essential. Her magic doesn't seek attention. It doesn't crash through walls or burst with rainbow explosions. Her spells are whispers rather than roars. When she calls on the forest, the vines obey like old friends. When she vanishes into the shadows, it feels less like she's hiding and more like the trees are folding her into themselves. Her magic is rooted in harmony, not control. Most wizards in OO have an almost transactional relationship with magic. They study, they chant, they wear glowing robes, and collect ancient artifacts. Magic for them is something external, something to be used. But for Huntress Wizard, magic is not external, it's internalized. It's a rhythm she lives by, an energy she aligns with. It's in her footsteps, her voice, her breath. She doesn't dominate nature with spells. She listens to it, communes with it, And when the time is right, she asks. This sense of partnership makes her magic feel sacred, like the old ways, older than scrolls and staffs and glowing towers, older than even the Candy Kingdom itself. Her spells don't sound like formulas, they sound like prayers, earthy, ancient, and full of respect. It's no coincidence that her base of operations isn't a lab or a library, but a tree. Her magic isn't built, it grows. And that changes everything. Think about how differently that kind of magic must feel in her hands. When you work with the forest, when your power comes from listening instead of demanding, every spell becomes a conversation. Every moment becomes a chance to connect, to realign, to find where you are in the great web of living things. There's also a wildness in her magic that's rarely seen elsewhere in the show. It doesn't follow linear logic or predictable outcomes. Sometimes she summons spirits. Sometimes she channels energy through raw emotion. Sometimes her antlers glow with pure life force. There's no set formula because she is the formula. She is the conduit. And this is where her magic becomes inseparable from her identity. You can't talk about Huntress Wizard's abilities without talking about her relationship to the elements. The way she reads wind patterns like a book, or senses danger through the way leaves shiver in the canopy. Her magic isn't just about spellcraft, it's about attunement, feeling what others overlook, understanding that the forest is always speaking, and most people have just forgotten how to hear it. She hasn't. She still speaks that language, and it speaks through her. Even the way her vines move, fluid, reactive, alive, says something deeper. They don't just trap or defend, they express. They show emotion, fear, trust, even affection. Because they're not tools. They're extensions of her bond with the forest, extensions of her spirit. Compare this to someone like Ice King. His power for much of the show is tragic. A mask for grief, a crutch for loneliness. He uses magic to build walls around himself, but Huntress Wizard uses magic to dissolve those walls, to merge with her surroundings, to become in some ways indistinguishable from the forest itself. She is her environment, and in that way she becomes something more than a wizard. She becomes a guardian spirit, someone who doesn't just protect nature, but embodies it. Her magic isn't about spectacle. It's about stewardship. She heals what's broken, balances what's thrown off, and reminds us that power is not something to be hoarded. It's something to be earned, shared, and most of all, respected. Magic for Huntress Wizard isn't something she performs. It's something she channels. And that distinction is important. She doesn't treat magic as a personal achievement or a badge of honor. There's no ego in her spell work, no craving for recognition. That kind of humility is rare in the magical world of Adventure Time, where many wizards are eccentric, loud, or even power-hungry. Take Magic Man, for instance. His magic is chaos. His personality is his magic, twisted, unpredictable, designed to test others through pain or confusion. But Huntress Wizard, her magic is presence. It's about stillness and intention. There's a scene, brief but unforgettable, where she gathers herbs with such reverence, it feels like a ritual, and maybe it is. Maybe every simple action, steeping tea leaves, painting war marks, whispering to the moss, is a piece of her broader spell work. Not flashy, but felt. Because magic doesn't always announce itself with thunder. Sometimes it breathes. And here's the thing. Her power doesn't come from distance. It comes from closeness. The closer she is to the soil, to the roots, to the wild and untamed corners of the earth, the stronger she becomes. You can feel this in the way she walks, deliberate, barefoot, Like every step is a thank you to the ground beneath her. Like she understands that true magic requires intimacy, with the self, with others, and with the world. That intimacy means she doesn't have to dominate the magical forces around her. She invites them. When she draws her bow, when the forest responds, when the spirits stir, there's a mutual agreement happening. A quiet understanding that magic is at its best when it's shared, not seized. And that gives her a kind of mystical maturity that most other characters don't possess. But this doesn't mean she's infallible. Her connection to natural magic also makes her vulnerable, not in a way that weakens her, but in a way that grounds her. She doesn't have the luxury of detaching herself from the consequences of her power. When the forest suffers, she suffers. Oh, when the balance tips, she feels it in her bones. That empathy is baked into her magic. It's not optional. Which means her role as a protector isn't just a job, it's a responsibility, one she never brags about, one she rarely even discusses. But you can see it in the quiet way she surveys her surroundings, in the way she reacts to a creature in distress or an unnatural disturbance in the air. There's a sensitivity there, a magical awareness that borders on spiritual. And it's this aspect of her power that feels almost shamanic. Shamans in ancient traditions weren't simply magic users. They were guides, healers, story keepers, people who bridged the physical and the metaphysical. Huntress Wizard carries that same energy. She doesn't just cast spells, she translates truths. Truths that most others are too loud to hear. And she does it not with grand speeches or mystical tomes, but through example. Watch her long enough, and you start to understand the rhythm she's tuned to. It's not the rhythm of progress or ambition or conquest. It's the rhythm of the seasons, of death and rebirth, of the moon's slow crawl across the sky. Her magic mirrors the cycles of the natural world, blooming, wilting, resting, growing. There's beauty in that rhythm, but there's also sorrow, because nature is not always kind. There are storms, there is rot, there is fire, and Huntress Wizard doesn't shy away from that. She accepts it as part of the whole. Her magic doesn't erase those darker elements, it incorporates them. Her vines can comfort, but they can also constrict. Her arrows can hunt, but they can also protect. That duality is at the heart of her relationship with magic. She doesn't draw lines between good and bad magic. She draws lines between destructive and restorative intent. And that distinction matters. Because in Ooh, where magic has fractured into 1,000 competing styles and ideologies, her way is one of the few that insists on balance. She's not trying to win a magical war. She's trying to keep the entire system from tipping over. That's why you rarely see her in magical battles just for show. If she fights, it's because something is threatening equilibrium. And when she strikes, it's with precision, not rage. Even her fiercest moments are guided by clarity. There's a deep lesson here, that true magic isn't about what you can do. It's about what you choose to do. And Huntress Wizard time and again chooses mindfulness. Her mindfulness, though subtle, reveals the heart of her magical philosophy, a refusal to be separated from what sustains her. And in that we begin to see that Huntress Wizard's relationship with magic is not just emotional or philosophical. It's existential. Magic is her language, yes, but also her mirror. It reflects who she is in every season of her inner life, her solitude, her restraint, her intensity, her silence. And like a forest, she is often misjudged from the outside. To many in Ooh, she might seem aloof, mysterious, cold even. But that's because she doesn't decorate her magic with spectacle or performance. Her magic is personal, intimate, and only those who slow down, who listen, truly feel the depth of what she carries. One of the most striking things about Huntress Wizard's magic is that it rarely serves herself. She's not using it to get ahead, to impress anyone, or to amass power, and there's no vanity in her casting, no need for admiration. She acts on behalf of the land, the creatures, the balance that holds together. Think about how rare that is. In a world filled with magical egos, floating castles, and flamboyant duelists, she is a quiet sentinel, and that makes her powerful in a way that is not always visible, but always felt. The forest doesn't shout, it doesn't demand to be seen, but it's there, vast, patient, humming with life. That's the kind of power she taps into, the slow, steady pulse of enduring magic. She walks through that power with grace. And yet, that same grace can be lonely. There's a cost to living in harmony with magic the way she does. It means isolation, more often than not. Few people can truly understand what it's like to live with such open sensitivity to the world around you. Few people are willing to quiet themselves enough to hear what she hears, to feel what she feels. Magic becomes a kind of emotional burden, a gift that isolates. But she doesn't resent it. She honors it. She retreats into the woods, not to hide, but to heal, to reconnect, to listen again. Because for her, the forest is not a backdrop. It's home. It's sanctuary. It's teacher. And magic is not something she does. It's something she belongs to. This is why, when she finally opens up to others, when she trusts, when she reveals even a sliver of her heart, it feels like magic too. Not the kind that glows or sparkles, but the kind that lingers in the chest, quiet, trembling, true. Because someone who has made themselves into a vessel for nature's rhythm doesn't offer connection lightly. Her power, after all, is built on trust. She trusts the forest, the wind, the vines, the spirit of the world. And so when she finally trusts another person, it means something. It's not just friendship, it's sacred alignment. We see this, however briefly, in her interactions with Finn. There's a moment, simple, almost playful, when she tells him, "You smell like a wizard." It's a half-tease, but beneath it there's recognition, a flicker of something deeper, not romance exactly, but resonance. Something in him echoes something in her. Maybe it's his openness, his vulnerability, his longing to connect with things larger than himself. And maybe, just maybe, she sees that in him because she recognizes it, because she knows what it's like to carry magic, not as a weapon, but as a calling. And that brings us to one of the quiet truths of her story. She chose this path. She wasn't born into magical royalty. She didn't inherit a grand destiny. Her powers come from practice, from discipline, from alignment, and above all, from choice. She chose to listen, chose to walk barefoot, chose to speak to the trees, chose to stay in the woods when the world moved on. That choice, to live in tune with forces that cannot be seen or controlled, is the essence of her magic. And it's a kind of courage, a quiet, rarely celebrated kind of courage. The courage to walk away from glory. The courage to let the forest change you, to let your magic grow slowly, the way roots grow deep, not dramatic, but enduring. It's no wonder, then, that her spells often involve transformation, not in the flashy, body-altering way that wizards sometimes use, but in the energetic sense. Her presence transforms the environment, calms it, clarifies it, realigns it. That is her truest magic. Not just what she can do, but how she makes others feel. Calmer still, in touch with something ancient and steady and good. And that, perhaps, is the most powerful kind of magic there is. When we talk about Huntress Wizard's relationship with magic, we're not really talking about incantations or flashy spell books. We're talking about a way of being, a way of listening, of walking through the world with reverence. Her magic isn't a means to an end. It's an ethos, a way of relating to life itself. And that's what makes her so different from the other wizards in Ooh. So many see magic as a tool, something to be shaped and wielded. They use it to extend their reach, to change outcomes, to escape consequences. But Huntress Wizard's magic accepts the world. It doesn't resist nature. It partners with it. It says, I see this forest. I feel this storm. I will not fight it. I will move with it. In this way, she teaches us something rare in a world obsessed with control, that magic is most beautiful when it's not about domination, but about harmony. We've seen her call upon spirits with barely a whisper. We've seen her fire arrows laced with the wild essence of the woods. We've seen her commune with things ancient and unseen. And through it all, she never loses herself in the power, never tries to become more than she is. She stays grounded, humble, listening. There's a quiet confidence in that restraint, and it's powerful. Because while the world often rewards the loudest voices and the most explosive spells, Huntress Wizard reminds us that the strongest forces in nature often move in silence. The root systems beneath our feet, the pull of the moon on the tides, the steady growth of moss on stone. Her magic mirrors these forces, subtle, patient, indelible. It's why she rarely explains herself. She doesn't need to. The way she exists is her explanation. And perhaps that's why so many fans feel drawn to her, even if they can't fully explain why. There's something magnetic about her, something elemental. She feels like the part of ourselves that still remembers the forest, the part that aches for stillness, for meaning, for connection to something deeper than the noise of everyday life. She awakens that longing in us, not just to wield magic, but to live it, to approach life with the same careful reverence she shows to a leaf, a flame, a shadow at twilight, to stop grasping for more and instead tune ourselves to what's already there, the unseen, the eternal. And in this way, her relationship with magic becomes more than a theme. It becomes an invitation. She invites us to consider, what would it mean to live magically, not by casting spells, but by moving through the world with intention? By treating nature not as a backdrop, but as a partner, by finding strength in quiet, by listening instead of always speaking. For Huntress Wizard, these aren't abstract questions. They're choices she's already made, and they've shaped her into one of the most grounded, quietly wise characters in the Adventure Time universe. She'll never be the loudest or the most celebrated or the most understood. But in her silent communion with the forces of the world, in the way she makes the forest listen, the wind bend, the vines rise, she shows us something invaluable, that real magic isn't about being seen. It's about seeing. And in a world that so often forgets to look deeply, that might be the most enchanting gift of all. When two souls as different as Huntress Wizard and Finn the human find their paths crossing, it doesn't feel like fate exactly. It feels quieter than that, more like resonance, like two melodies humming in the same key, though they come from very different instruments. At first glance, their connection might seem unlikely. Finn, open-hearted, impulsive, always looking for adventure, feels like a beam of daylight. He's loud with his emotions, generous with his affections, always reaching outward. Huntress Wizard, by contrast, is the twilight, measured, reserved. Her emotions move like shadows, real but elusive. Where Finn rushes in, she pauses. Where he speaks, she listens. And yet somehow they see each other. Not just on the surface, but in ways that make you wonder if some part of them was always waiting for this encounter. Their connection begins not with fireworks or dramatic confessions, but with curiosity, a kind of gentle tug. Finn meets Huntress Wizard in the forest, drawn in by her mystery. But it's not just mystery that intrigues him, it's her depth, her stillness, her command of magic and nature. He doesn't try to break it open, he just wants to understand it, wants to understand her. That alone makes their dynamic special. Because Finn, despite his wild youth and sometimes reckless heart, respects her boundaries. He doesn't try to make her change. He doesn't demand she explain herself. He accepts that she is something he doesn't fully understand, and that makes him patient in a way we haven't always seen. There's a beautiful moment in their early interactions, subtle but telling. Huntress Wizard tells him, "You smell like a wizard." It's a teasing line on the surface, but there's warmth underneath, recognition, almost a quiet surprise. She didn't expect to find someone whose energy resonated with her own, someone who wasn't trying to conquer nature, but connect with it, someone willing to grow in silence. For Huntress Wizard, who keeps the world at arm's length, that's a big deal, because she isn't just cautious. She's protective, not only of herself, but of her space, her peace, the sacred balance she holds with the natural world. Letting someone in isn't easy for her. She doesn't flirt. She doesn't show vulnerability easily. And she doesn't play games. So when she starts opening the door to Finn, ever so slightly, it means something. It means he's earned a kind of trust very few ever do. And what does Finn do with that? He honors it. Instead of rushing in like a typical hero, he lets the relationship unfold slowly. He doesn't try to define it or force it into some ideal of romance. He simply shows up again and again, in the forest, in moments of danger, in quiet spaces where words aren't needed. There's an almost sacred slowness to how they grow close. It's not a fairy tale, not a whirlwind romance. It's more like the slow thaw of winter into spring. You don't see the moment everything changes, but suddenly there are flowers where snow once lay. Suddenly, she's smiling at him, joking, letting him closer. And for Finn, who has loved before, who has been hurt before, this kind of connection is rare. He's had crushes. He's chased ideals. He's learned what it means to be let down and what it means to let go. So when he meets someone who grounds him, who meets him not with drama but with stillness, it shifts something in him. He doesn't have to perform for her. He doesn't have to prove anything. He just has to be present. And perhaps that's the heart of their connection, presence. Because when Huntress Wizard is with Finn, you can feel her drop her guard, even if just a little. She lets herself laugh, lets herself listen, lets herself wonder what it might feel like to be truly seen and not chased. And Finn, in turn, stops searching for something bigger or better. He just wants this moment, this person, this quiet harmony between them. It's not loud. It's not dramatic, but it's real. And sometimes that's the kind of love, or almost love, that stays with you longest. There's a moment that often gets overlooked. Quiet, almost nothing on the surface, but it reveals so much. In the episode Flute Spell, When Finn follows Huntress Wizard into the forest, he doesn't fully understand why. He just feels something. And that's very Finn, isn't it? He's not always great at untangling the emotions that move him, but he follows them with full sincerity. What he finds isn't some dramatic confession or enchanted romance. What he finds is resistance. Huntress Wizard tells him plainly, she doesn't do flirting. She's not interested in distraction. She's focused on self-growth, on her connection to the forest. And Finn, surprisingly, respects that. He doesn't pout or push. He listens. He learns. That might not sound like much, but for someone who's still growing into emotional maturity, it's a pivotal moment. It shows he's starting to understand that love isn't always about pursuit. Sometimes it's about patience. Sometimes it's about letting someone be. That's what makes their story so compelling. Because in a world where relationships often fall into the same patterns, where boy meets girl, feelings are confessed, and arcs tie up with neat little bows, this one doesn't. Huntress Wizard and Finn never fully cross that line into traditional romance. Their connection stays suspended in that shimmering in-between space. It's never quite named, never quite resolved. And that ambiguity, that's where the magic lives. We see it in their body language, in shared silences, in glances that linger just a bit too long. These are not two people who need constant affirmation. They're not caught up in the labels. They feel something real. But they also honor the complexity of that feeling. They don't force it into a box. They just let it be. And that's brave. Because letting something remain undefined, especially something as tender as a growing affection, is one of the hardest things we can do. It requires trust, emotional maturity, a willingness to sit with the unknown. And both Finn and Huntress Wizard show us how beautiful that process can be. One of the most telling moments in their evolving connection comes in Wizard City, long after many of their initial interactions. When Finn needs help, Huntress Wizard is there. Not because she has to be, not because there's a grand romantic payoff waiting, but because she wants to be, because she respects him, because she cares in her own quiet way. It's in these moments, small acts of loyalty, of presence, of unspoken affection, that their bond deepens. No fireworks, no declarations, just being there. And there's a quiet intimacy in that, a kind of emotional realism that's rare in animated storytelling. Adventure Time has never been afraid of nuance, but with Finn and Huntress Wizard, it pushes into something even more delicate. The idea that not all connections have to end in, I love you. Sometimes they end in something more subtle, more mysterious. A shared walk in the woods, a half smile, a mutual silence that says, I see you. For Finn, who has often struggled with the weight of his feelings, his desire to be wanted, to be chosen, this connection marks a shift. With Huntress Wizard, he learns to sit in the moment, to be okay with ambiguity, to feel affection without ownership, to love in a way that asks nothing in return. And for Huntress Wizard, someone so fiercely independent, so deeply guarded, Finn becomes a rare exception. Not someone who threatens her solitude, but someone who understands it. Someone who doesn't try to tear down her walls, but instead quietly waits outside, content just to be near. Their connection is like a clearing in the middle of the forest, a place that exists between paths. You can't live there forever, but while you're there, everything feels still, true, sacred. And that's what they give each other. Not a finished story, but a space to pause the story, to breathe, to grow, to wonder. And maybe that's the deepest kind of connection of all. There's a kind of poetry in the way Finn and Huntress Wizard orbit each other, never colliding, never drifting too far, just circling, like moons bound by a shared gravity. They don't demand permanence. They don't define their connection in words, but it's there, tangible, felt. And sometimes, and that's more powerful than any romance spelled out in black and white. Because here's the truth. Huntress Wizard could have chosen to remain completely detached. It would have been easy for her. She spent years cultivating solitude, drawing strength from the wild, retreating into her own rhythms. She knows how to be alone. She's not looking for completion. She already is whole. But even still, she allows Finn in. Not all the way and not without caution, but she lets him stand beside her. She lets him see fragments of her truth, her frustrations, her ideals, her quiet joy when something in the world surprises her. That's no small gesture for someone so guarded. She doesn't need him, but she allows him. And that's its own kind of intimacy. On the flip side, Finn, who once chased love like it was a prize to be won, learns to approach differently. He learns to listen more and speak less, to wait, to stop seeing relationships as conquests and start seeing them as gardens, living things, things that bloom not with force, but with care. This evolution is one of the most beautiful arcs in Finn's emotional journey. You can trace the line from his heartbreak with Princess Bubblegum through the messy intensity of his relationship with Flame Princess and arrive here with Huntress Wizard, someone who doesn't feed his need for drama, but instead calls him to be still, to be present, to be real. Their bond reshapes his understanding of connection. It teaches him that not all closeness needs to be loud. Not all affection needs to burn. Some love, if we can even call it that, is like the moss on an old tree. Quiet, patient, rooted, doesn't announce itself, but it endures. That's what makes the rare moments of openness between them so touching. Like when Huntress Wizard calls Finn cute. It's such a small thing, tucked into the rhythm of their exchange, almost a throwaway line. But coming from her, someone who shields her feelings behind layers of mystery, it's a gift, a peek behind the curtain, a little ember of warmth in the quiet wilderness of her soul. And the way Finn responds, not with bravado, not with some cheesy quip. He blushes, smiles, lets the moment be. It's in these small exchanges that their connection breathes. Neither of them tries to pin it down. Neither asks, "What are we?" or "Where is this going?" They just allow it to exist. This quiet understanding, this rhythm they found together, as natural and unforced as the wind moving through the trees. Even when they part ways, there's no heartbreak, no lingering resentment. And there's trust. There's peace. It's as if they both know whatever this thing between them is doesn't need to be named or owned to be real. Some connections aren't meant to be stories with a clear beginning, middle, and end. Some are meant to be moments, deep, fleeting moments that echo long after they've passed. And maybe that's why their bond lingers in the minds of so many fans. Because we've all felt that kind of connection before. That person who entered our life and changed something, not through grand gestures, but through their presence, their stillness, their truth. Sometimes it's not about who we end up with. It's about who helped us grow, who saw us at a time when we were still figuring ourselves out and made us feel understood. That's what Huntress Wizard is for Finn. Not a forever, but a mirror, a breath of clarity in the forest of his life. And Finn, in turn, offers her something equally rare, a reason to trust, a reason to soften, a reminder that connection doesn't always mean losing yourself. Sometimes it means finding someone who sees the real you and stays. Their final scene together in the series doesn't explode with revelations. No final kiss, no long farewell. But if you look closely, really pay attention, you can feel something profound, a settledness, a mutual respect. Two people who once met in the wild, met as strangers chasing magic, now standing side by side, not because they need to, but because they choose to. There's beauty in that choice. Because at the end of the day, Huntress Wizard and Finn don't teach us about love in the romanticized way we often see. They teach us about something softer, something rarer, emotional equilibrium, a bond where neither person asks the other to change, a bond that simply says, I see where you are, and I honor it. And in a show filled with kingdoms and curses, battles and quests, this kind of human connection is its own kind of magic. For Huntress Wizard, the forest is everything. It's where she feels whole, alive, and unseen by the noise of the world. And yet she allowed a piece of her solitude to be shared for a moment with Finn. Not because he asked, but because he earned it. And Finn, ever the adventurer, found something rare with her. Not a new thrill or conquest, but stillness. A girl who didn't chase him, who didn't coddle him, who didn't try to explain away the strange ache of being young and trying to understand yourself. She just existed with him. And for once, that was enough. It's easy to miss how revolutionary that is, especially in media aimed at younger audiences. But it's quietly radical, a relationship based on presence, not performance, on respect, not reward. No one changes who they are. No one gets a big romantic win, but both leave each other better. And maybe that's the whole point. Because not every connection needs to end in a love story to matter. Some of the most meaningful people we meet come into our lives to illuminate something, to reflect something back at us, to walk with us, if only briefly, through a chapter we didn't know how to navigate alone. Huntress Wizard helped Finn understand his heart without rushing it. Finn helped Huntress Wizard remember that connection doesn't always come to disrupt. It can come to coexist. They are, in the truest sense, kindred spirits, wild, brave, and deeply committed to their own paths. But for a little while, their paths ran side by side. That's not a detour, and that's not a distraction. That's a gift. So if you ever walk alone in the woods, if you hear the wind stir the leaves just right, if you catch the echo of a flute in the distance and feel something familiar tugging at your chest, you might be remembering them. Two souls who found each other not in the noise but in the quiet. Not in the spark of love, but in the embers of something maybe even deeper. Recognition. That's what lives in their story, not drama, not resolution. Just two hearts who found, for a time, a gentle rhythm together. And in that rhythm, something true. The forest isn't just Huntress Wizard's home. It's her origin, her sanctuary, her truth. Long before we see her interact with Finn, long before she becomes entangled in battles or bonds, we sense that she belongs to the woods in a way most characters never belong to anything. She is the forest, its shadow, its song, its strange silence. She doesn't simply walk among trees. She breathes with them, moves with them. There's an intimacy between her and the natural world that goes deeper than mere magic. It's spiritual, elemental, as if the roots of the land twine around her soul. And for all its beauty, the forest is not a soft place. It is not gentle or easy to understand. It is dense, unknowable, wild in the truest sense. There are no road signs in the places Huntress Wizard wanders. No straight paths, no clear goals. Just moss and shadows, breath and rustle. Life blooming and decaying all at once. The kind of place that humbles you, not because it's hostile, but because it simply doesn't care whether you understand it or not. That's where Huntress Wizard comes from. Not from civilization, not from courtly politics or wizard tournaments, but from something older, wilder, a space where rules dissolve and instincts rise, a space where you don't prove yourself by talking louder or acting tougher, but by listening, by knowing when to wait, when to blend in, when to let the wind move through you without trying to hold it. In that way, Huntress Wizard isn't just a character. She's a force. Not a hero in the traditional sense, but a guardian, a spirit of the woodlands. Not someone who controls the forest, but someone who allows it to shape her. That's a rare kind of strength. It's not about conquering or dominating. It's about communion. She listens to the murmur of roots, follows the call of birds, studies the patterns of growth and decay as if they were sacred texts. And through that, she becomes more than a person. She becomes a channel. There's a reason why her spells don't sparkle, why her magic doesn't announce itself in bright colors or sharp booms. It whispers, it flows, it echoes through bark and bone. And what's more powerful than that? While other wizards seek status or immortality, Huntress Wizard seeks something less flashy but far more elusive. Harmony. To be in balance with the land. To become so attuned to the wild that her own heartbeat matches the rhythm of the forest. That's her quest. Not power, not fame, not even wisdom in the academic sense. Just deep, grounded knowing. It's telling that her strongest moments never happen in crowded places. They happen when she's alone, watching over a deer, communing with vines, crafting spells from raw bark and breath. Even her solitude is a kind of strength, not loneliness, but chosen aloneness, a sacred stillness that sharpens the soul. And yet she's no cold mystic. There's passion in her, too. Fire in the way she moves, speaks, fights. She's not a passive observer of nature. She defends it, protects it, lives for it. When something threatens the balance of the wild, she doesn't hesitate. She steps forward, bow drawn, magic thrumming in her veins like wind through leaves. Because to her, the forest is not abstract. It is family. And if you harm what she loves, you will meet the sharpness hidden behind her quiet. But perhaps the most compelling thing about Huntress Wizard's bond with the forest is that it isn't static. It evolves. It breathes and bends just like the land she guards. Because as rooted as she is in tradition, in primal instinct, she also adapts, learns, grows in her own strange rhythm. And maybe that's what the wild truly is. Not chaos, not danger, but change. The kind of change that doesn't ask permission. Seasons don't apologize. Trees don't explain why they let go of their leaves. The forest just moves, forward and inward at once. And Huntress Wizard, with her green-tinted cloak and elemental spells, doesn't fight that change. She folds herself into it. She becomes it. This isn't meant to say she's immune to struggle. Even within her stoic presence, there are cracks, moments of doubt, friction, restlessness. She speaks often in riddles, cloaking emotion and metaphor. But the subtext is there, the weight she carries, the loneliness that sometimes curls at the edges of her voice. Because to walk alone in the wild, for so long, to choose nature over community, is not without sacrifice. And yet that sacrifice seems intentional, sacred even. It's almost as if Huntress Wizard chooses to bear that solitude so others won't have to. She becomes the guardian of a space most people are too afraid to enter, a protector of balance in a world that constantly pushes for excess. In her quiet watchfulness, she gives the forest a voice. She is that voice, and in doing so, she embraces something few ever dare to embody, a life guided not by ego, but by reverence. You see this in the way she speaks. Her tone is deliberate, grounded, like someone who spent years listening to the wind before ever learning to speak to people. There's no rush in her dialogue, no need to fill silence with chatter, and that stillness isn't emptiness. It's full of knowing, like a tree that's weathered 1,000 storms and knows which ones matter. And it's not just the trees she communes with. She walks with animals, not as pets or beasts of burden, but as equals. Creatures of instinct and rhythm, she seems to understand their movements, their fears, their wisdom. She doesn't domesticate them. She respects them, and in turn, they accept her. That's the thing about Huntress Wizard. She doesn't impose her will on nature. She aligns with it. When she fires an arrow, it's not just a shot. It's an offering, a gesture of intent, guided by the forest itself. Her aim isn't flawless because she trains like a soldier. It's flawless because she's listening to wind direction, to tension, to the mood of the moment. Every spell, every step feels like a conversation between her and the wild. And if the forest ever whispered something new, something unexpected, she would hear it first. There's one scene in particular that encapsulates this beautifully. In the episode Flute Spell, when she and Finn track the elemental creature across the woods, you can feel her shift. This isn't just a mission. It's a communion, a ritual. She moves with a kind of reverence, even urgency, like someone walking through sacred ground. She doesn't rush forward blindly. She listens. She senses. And when the creature appears, her response isn't aggression. It's awe. Because even the strange, even the dangerous is part of the balance. And balance for Huntress Wizard is everything. That's perhaps what separates her from most of the other magic users in Adventure Time. While many manipulate magic to bend the world to their will, she uses it to understand her place within the world. She doesn't build towers or artifacts or elaborate potions. Her power lies in something far simpler and far harder to fake: presence. She's present with the land, present with herself, present with the moment, even when that moment is inconvenient or painful or mysterious. And through that presence, she becomes something more than just a solitary figure in a green hood. She becomes a living expression of the wild. A reminder that not all strength is loud, not all magic is flashy. Some of it is quiet, patient, rooted in stillness and song, in knowing when to act and when to wait, when to intervene and when to let nature take its course. That's the essence of Huntress Wizard. Not the chase, not the battle, but the listening. The ability to walk through the chaos of a world constantly demanding action, and instead ask, what is needed now? And what is needed, more often than not, is restraint. That's something Huntress Wizard understands better than most. In a world where power is often measured by how much you can take or destroy or dominate, she teaches us the quiet strength of holding back. She doesn't cast spells to impress or strike out in anger. She waits. She observes. She allows her instincts and the rhythm of nature to guide her hand. It's a philosophy that mirrors the forest itself. The trees don't clamor for attention. They don't move unless there's wind. They simply are. Constant, rooted, patient. They don't rise to every provocation because they don't need to. They've survived more winters than any creature remembers. Their stillness is not passivity. it's wisdom. Huntress Wizard embodies that kind of wisdom. Even in the moments when danger arises, when creatures stir from the darkness, or when balance is threatened by noise and chaos, her first move isn't to attack, it's to understand, to lean in, to feel what's happening before reacting. And in that way, she honors the wild not just with her presence, but with her restraint. There's a kind of power in that. And yet, the forest inside her isn't always calm. We've seen glimpses, flashes of fire in her eyes, tension in her stance, hints of a storm beneath the surface. Because nature isn't all peace and serenity. It's also teeth and thorns. It's rain that doesn't stop. It's fire sparked by lightning. It's vines that twist too tight. Huntress Wizard carries that duality. She doesn't pretend the wild is all beauty and harmony. She respects the danger. She is the danger when she needs to be. And that's the complexity that makes her more than a mystical stereotype. She's not just a soft-spoken forest guardian. She's a being of extremes, a storm in disguise, a warning wrapped in moss and mystery. She knows how to hold space, but also how to protect it. And that tension, the wildness within, gives her depth. One moment she's meditating by a stream, eyes closed, surrounded by deer and fireflies. The next, she's launching herself into the trees like an arrow, teeth bared, hunting a creature that dares disrupt the balance. And in both states, she is true. Neither one is a costume. Neither one is a contradiction. Because this is what it means to live in the wild, to be still and to strike, to flow and to fight. And in Huntress Wizard, those opposites find harmony. It's why she doesn't fit easily into the usual roles. She's not a hero in the way Finn is, charging in with optimism and fists. She's not a villain like Orgalor, consumed by conquest. She isn't even a mentor exactly. She offers no structured lessons, no tidy explanations, but she teaches all the same. She teaches through example, through presence, through choice, just like the wild itself. Because the forest doesn't tell you how to live, it simply lives and invites you to notice, to walk with it, to hear the crunch of leaves underfoot and the distant call of an owl, and to wonder rather than solve. And Huntress Wizard, in her own elusive way, invites us into that same wondering. It's easy to see why other characters are drawn to her. She radiates something many of them don't even know they're looking for, a reminder of something ancient and honest, something not built on rules or cities or even language, but something deeper, a return to something we've all come from, the wild. The uncivilized grace of instinct, the joy of silence, the courage to live without a map. She doesn't belong to the Candy Kingdom, or the Ice Kingdom, or the Nightosphere. She doesn't swear fealty to any crown or system. Her loyalty is to the wind, the soil, the creatures that make their homes in shadows and roots. And that loyalty makes her incorruptible. Not because she's flawless, but because she knows who she is. Her identity isn't tangled in others' expectations. She doesn't chase power for validation. She doesn't perform wisdom to be admired. She simply lives in alignment with what she values: freedom, balance, and the sacred mystery of the natural world. And in doing so, she becomes one of the most grounded characters in Adventure Time's sprawling universe. Which is funny considering how little we know about her past. Her origins are a mystery. Her backstory is fragmented at best. But maybe that's the point. The wild doesn't hand out neat biographies. It offers impressions, echoes. You learn not by reading, but by being there, in the mud, in the canopy, in the strange quiet just before a storm. And that's what makes Huntress Wizard unforgettable. Not because we understand her completely, but because we feel her. Like fog in the trees, like a flute echoing in the dark. She's the pulse of something older than memory. Something we've lost, but never stopped longing for. To watch Huntress Wizard is to remember that some truths can't be explained. They can only be experienced. Like the way moss feels beneath your fingers, or the hush that falls in the forest after fresh snow. She embodies the kind of knowledge that exists before words, before systems. The kind that doesn't need to justify itself to be real. It simply is. And in this world of kings and quests and candy castles, that makes her quietly revolutionary. Because she doesn't fight for thrones. She doesn't seek justice in the way others do. Her fight is slower, quieter, more enduring. She fights for a place, a way of life that honors balance, silence, and connection. A place where magic isn't just power, but a relationship. A conversation with everything that breathes, grows, and decays. She shows us that being in harmony with the wild isn't just about being gentle. Sometimes it's about being fierce in your stillness, unshakable in your knowing. Sometimes it's about walking away from noise and into solitude, not out of isolation, but out of devotion to something deeper. And sometimes it's about letting go, because the wild doesn't cling, it sheds, it molts. It dies back in winter so it can bloom again in spring. That's a hard lesson for most people. But Huntress Wizard lives it daily. She lets go of comfort, of easy companionship, of predictability. And in return, she gains something far rarer, wholeness. Her story isn't one of conquest or redemption. It's one of alignment. She knows who she is. And she knows where she belongs. Not in a palace, not on a pedestal, but deep in the forest, where the moonlight filters through the trees and the wind carries ancient songs only a few can hear. That's where her power comes from. Not from some ancient relic or legendary birthright, but from choosing, again and again, to stay connected to the wild, to listen, to learn, to move like water and stand like stone, to trust that the forest will guide her. And so it does. That's the magic of Huntress Wizard. Not in the spells she casts, but in the way she lives. And maybe, just maybe, that's what calls to Finn. Not just her skills or her mystery, but the part of him that still longs to belong, to find something real and unchanging in a world that keeps shifting under his feet. We'll talk more about that in the next segment. But for now, just sit with her a little longer. Picture her walking the wooded trails under a silver sky. Her boots soft on moss, her breath steady. A wolf at her side, her bow slung across her back. No destination, no map. Just her and the wind. Just the forest and the wild within. What does it mean to leave a mark on the world without ever asking to be remembered? Huntress Wizard never sets out to build a legacy. There are no statues in her name, no songs sung in her honor at the Candy Kingdom. She doesn't wear a crown or hold a title, and yet she lingers in the minds of those who cross her path, in the rustling trees where her footsteps fade, in the hearts of viewers who see something of themselves in her quiet strength. Hers is a legacy written not in gold, but in green, not carved into stone, but whispered in wind. And maybe that's the point. Legacy doesn't always roar. Sometimes it grows. Huntress. Wizard's emotional impact on the world of Adventure Time lies not in sweeping acts or epic battles, but in the subtle gravity of who she is. She shows up when she's needed. She vanishes when the moment passes. And in doing so, she teaches us something profound about the value of presence. not performance. There's something undeniably healing about her. She doesn't talk much. She rarely explains herself, but when she's on screen, something shifts. The air feels cooler. The pace slows. We lean in. We listen. Not for what she'll say, but for what we'll feel in the quiet spaces between her words. And that feeling, that presence, is part of her emotional legacy. She's a symbol for the parts of ourselves we often overlook. The intuitive, the patient, the solitary. The parts that crave connection without needing control. That long to belong, not to someone, but to something. To a rhythm, a place, a truth that doesn't ask us to change in order to fit. For Finn, she becomes a mirror. Not one that flatters or distorts, but one that reflects, honestly, calmly, fully. His feelings for her aren't just about romance. They're about recognition. He sees in her what he wants to grow into, someone grounded, self-possessed, spiritually connected to a world bigger than them both. And she sees something in him too. Not just a goofy boy with a crush, but a soul still searching. A heart that hasn't given up even after heartbreak. She doesn't coddle him. She doesn't chase him. But she offers something gentler and in many ways stronger. A chance to grow, to listen to himself, to meet her not in fantasy but in truth. That relationship, brief, honest, complex, is part of her emotional legacy too. It leaves us with questions rather than answers. Could they have worked? Did she care for him as deeply as he did for her? What was that kiss, really? But maybe those questions are the gift, because not every connection needs to be resolved to be meaningful. Some are meant to awaken us, to open a door inside, to change the way we move through the world, even if they don't last. And that's what she gives Finn. That's what she gives us. A glimpse of something ancient, something sacred. A love that doesn't cling but transforms. That's emotional storytelling at its most refined. No melodrama, no declarations. Just tension, silence, and a few glances that say more than words ever could. And then she's gone again. Back to the forest. Back to herself. And when she fades back into the shadows of the forest, she doesn't leave emptiness behind. She leaves echoes. Echoes that stay with us long after her final scene. Because Huntress Wizard represents more than a single character in a sprawling show. She's an idea, a meditation, a slow-burning reminder that meaning can be quiet, that impact can be gentle, and that the strongest people don't always shout. In a world that often moves too fast, she is slow. In a story filled with noise and chaos and comedy, she brings stillness. She's not there to steal the spotlight. She's there to center it, to ground us, to remind us of what's real beneath the magic, beneath the adventure, beneath the masks we all wear. This is part of what makes her so unique in Adventure Time's emotional tapestry. The show, with all its wild inventiveness and surreal storytelling, is filled with big emotions, heartbreak, loss, joy, fear. We've watched Finn grow up through wounds and victories, watched Princess Bubblegum wrestle with morality, watched Marceline face her past, and Ice King collapse into Simon. But Huntress Wizard, she feels like a secret emotion, a feeling we rarely talk about but always carry. She embodies acceptance, not resignation, not defeat, but the kind of deep spiritual acceptance that says, this is the path, this is who I am, this is what I need. There's peace in that, and power. It's the peace of knowing your boundaries, the power of not needing to change for others, the freedom to love without possession, to walk away without bitterness, to live in the world without letting the world live in you. And this emotional legacy, this hard-earned wisdom, is especially rare in characters who aren't front and center. She appears only a handful of times, and yet every scene is rich with subtext. You can feel the weight of her silence, the purpose in her movement, the grief and grace and solitude that shaped her into what she's become. It's in the way she speaks in riddles, not to be cryptic, but because plain language isn't enough to capture her world. It's in her rituals, her camouflage, her connection to the elemental forces of the forest. It's in her restraint. Because she could easily be more powerful than most characters we meet. But she chooses stillness, chooses presence. She knows when to act and when to let things unfold. That emotional patience isn't just part of her character, it's part of her philosophy. And in that way, she becomes more than a wizard, more than a love interest. She becomes a symbol. Of all the quiet people who move through life with purpose, unseen, the ones who live close to the earth, who find meaning in patterns others overlook, the ones who don't seek attention, but whose presence shifts the air when they enter a room. You might miss them if you blink, but once you've seen them, you never forget. That's Huntress Wizard's emotional impact. Not flashy, not loud, but lasting. Her legacy also lives in how she makes us feel about ourselves. For viewers who feel out of step with the world, those who have always felt a little too quiet, too internal, too sensitive, Huntress Wizard is a quiet revelation. She reminds us that there is power in introspection, that mystery doesn't mean emptiness, and that solitude isn't the same as loneliness. In a culture that often rewards loudness and visibility, she affirms something quieter, that peace is a form of strength too. There's an emotional courage in that. It takes courage to be still in a world that screams, to turn inward when everything around you demands performance. Huntress Wizard doesn't fight that world. She simply doesn't belong to it. And in doing so, she offers a kind of escape for the rest of us. An invitation to breathe, to listen, to feel deeply, and move gently. This becomes even more meaningful when we consider how rare this archetype is in animation, especially for female characters. Huntress Wizard isn't defined by her relationships to others. She's not reduced to a trope. She's not comic relief, nor is she a tragic backstory machine. She's her own center of gravity, her own myth. And that myth says something beautiful. That it's okay to be wild and soft, to be hard to understand but easy to feel, to be both healer and hunter. That you don't have to explain yourself to be real. You don't have to open your heart on demand to prove it exists. That it's enough to just be authentic. She teaches emotional boundaries without ever making a speech about them. She models intuitive living without needing a manifesto. She honors nature not through slogans, but through presence, through choice, through reverence. And in all of this, she becomes something deeply human. Because while she may be cloaked in leaves and magic, Huntress Wizard is not unreachable. She's not some flawless sage or ethereal goddess. She's flawed. She's conflicted. She's guarded. She struggles to connect, to trust, to open up. Her solitude isn't just a lifestyle. It's a wound she's learned to live with, a scar that shaped her rituals, her armor, her distance. And yet, she loves, quietly, fiercely, without needing to possess or even fully understand that love. It leaks through the cracks of her detachment, in the way she guides Finn, in the way she accepts his affection without mocking it, in the way she allows herself to be seen, even if only for a moment. That emotional glimpse, that half smile, that slow blink, that kiss in the forest, isn't just romantic. It's redemptive. It's the kind of small, sacred moment that says, I'm still here. I still feel. I still care. It's a legacy built not on deeds, but on moments. Moments that stay with us. Moments that ask nothing of us, but still leave us changed. That's how we remember her, not because she demands remembrance, but because something deep inside recognizes her. Like seeing a shadow move through the trees and knowing somehow that it matters, that it's watching over you, that you're not alone. And maybe that's the most powerful part of Huntress Wizard's legacy. She sees the world clearly, but chooses not to control it. She feels deeply, but doesn't chase chaos or drama to prove it. She exists in harmony with her wildness, not taming it, not indulging it, but listening to it. She walks between stillness and storm, between detachment and devotion, and shows us that you can live a life that is yours alone and still be deeply connected to everything. In that way, Huntress Wizard becomes a kind of emotional compass. She doesn't guide with directions. She doesn't hand us a map. But by simply being who she is, fully, fiercely, quietly, she nudges us toward our own path, our own truth, our own relationship with the wild within us. And isn't that the dream? To find a way of living that doesn't betray who we are? To love deeply without losing ourselves? To let go without disappearing? In the end, Huntress Wizard's legacy isn't about magic or combat or romance. It's about presence. It's about wholeness. It's about what it means to be a part of the world, not because we're seen or celebrated, but because we belong, not as a conqueror, not as a hero, but as a participant, as someone in rhythm with the pulse of life. So as the forest breathes around her, and her figure fades back into the shadows of the trees, we're left not with answers, but with a feeling, one that stays with us, one that hums softly in the background of our thoughts, like birdsong at dawn, a reminder that we too can be gentle and strong, that we too can find our own forest to belong to, that we too can live lives that matter, not because they're loud, but because they're true. And so, as we close this long and winding journey into the story of Huntress Wizard, her origins, her philosophy, her quiet connection to Finn, her bond with the magic of nature, and the emotional roots of her legacy, I hope you feel something that words can't quite hold. A calm, a knowing, a flicker of green light deep in the trees of your own imagination. Because maybe that's how her magic really works. Not in spells, but in seeds, planted in quiet minds, growing slowly, softly, until one day we look around and realize we are not who we were when this story began. We've grown too. Thank you for spending this time with her, with us, and with yourself. Sleep well, dream deeply, and may the forest always guide you home.